Great.
Wow. We got 30 people waiting. And we got it. All right. So here we are. Welcome, everybody. We have Dan and Forrest from Atlas Lens Co. with us today, and a long list of questions. I hope you're as excited as I am about this live stream. I'm definitely a little nervous if you can't tell. Blake's here with me to figure out everything. We've been prepping for like an hour and a half now. So the live stream is actually easier than the prep if you think about it. Atlas has been a pleasure to work with. Both Dan and Forrest helped me a lot with the research parts and answering the trickiest questions in the cookbook. And Kathy has done the interface between all my questions and finding time with them. So it's been really great to work with them. And they really kicked off the Anamorphic cookbook. So I'm forever going to be grateful to Atlas for this. We do these live streams because we like them. So no one pays for this, and it's just fun. So join us, send questions in the chat, and subscribe to the channel. There's always anamorphic goodness here. We are rolling on an Atlas 40 here, and we'll figure out what they're rolling on. So let's bring them in. Hello, friends. How are you doing?
Hey, Hi, Cheeto. Thanks for having us, buddy.
Good to see you.
It's so much fun. It's so much fun talking to you guys. We've been kind of talking for like 45 minutes now, and we got very little ground covered. So I might reference points that we talked about in the last few minutes, but just pretend I never said anything.
Yeah, we want to keep it fresh, you know?
Yeah, right?
Do it live, as they say.
Yeah.
Yes. If you're good, you can do it live. My first question of all, before we go into deeper subjects, is a very easy one. It's basically, why do you love Anamorphic, and what's your favorite thing about it?
Forrest, you want to take this one first?
Sure. I think that my favorite thing about it, I'll kind of work backwards from what you asked, is the surreal aspect you get. It's like you see that this is life, but it's a version that you don't get to sort of experience on a day-to-day basis. So it makes that, you know, dream feeling, or that cinema is magic. I think even a little bit more magic. And that's what I love about Anamorphic mainly. It lets you experience something in a different vision that your eyes just don't give you, you know, reality.
I couldn't agree more, Forrest. I mean, to me, the special magic of Anamorphic is that it's an intersection of the imaginary world and then the very humanistic world that we live in. And if you look at sort of the origin of anamorphic cinematography, a lot of it comes from the notion of having binocular vision, as most of us are fortunate enough to have as human beings. Like, you know, if we don't have one bad eye, we're very blessed. And so you get that twice as wide horizontal field of view. And so it's a very humanistic expression, but with magical qualities. And that's, you know, very poetic and touching.
Yeah, I find it interesting that Anamorphic is so strongly related to science fiction, but every time we try to describe it, it's more towards fantastic realism than science fiction itself. I think that echoes what both of you said, and it's how I feel about it as well. It's like it's organic, but at the same time, it's not real. It's not how we see the world, kind of thing.
I mean, funny you mentioned that. That's kind of how I feel about science fiction. Is that, you know, people play science fiction as this very cold realm oftentimes, but really the best science fiction is human stories of science improving humanity. So it's sort of like a Renaissance thought.
Yep, I agree. I agree very much. If Ariana was here, my partner, she'd be like, yes, because science fiction is just so techie. Like, we can have sci-fi stories that are set in like futuristic, organic, natural worlds. I'm like, you're right.
That's what I love about the original Star Wars trilogy, which is, you know, famously Anamorphic.
Yes.
It's like those original Star Wars films, they're so gritty and so touching and human because, you know, you look at Luke Skywalker and he's basically a dork that lives on this planet that's basically Palmdale. If you're familiar with California, it's kind of like a desert town. And so he's kind of from this rural backwoods place, and he has these big dreams to aspire to, like, he wants to join the Empire, you know, at the beginning. And then
Yeah.
he figured out, oh yeah, maybe that's not as glossy as I thought it was, but I can do something better. So it's cool. It's a cool part of the storytelling.
Very true. Very, very true. So there's a passion for this visual, for this way of seeing things, and I guess that was enough to like build your own anamorphic lens, or like at this point 2 sets of lenses. How do you go from being passionate about something to making it a real thing that you can touch and work with? I guess it's a long journey.
Well, yeah, I'll start with my side and then I'll kind of explain. For me, it was definitely very just a personal thing that I wanted. I wanted it for myself, and it was like a journey that I was kind of keeping close to, I guess, my heart, really. Like, it was funny that when I do any filmmaking, I think it's really just an outlet for me. And so I've always viewed it as, I'll do this because I like doing this, and I do it usually for myself. So if I'm making just even a short piece, I get a lot of satisfaction in finishing that, you know, putting some editing there, doing some touches to it, and just kind of watching the result. Because again, it kind of goes back to that, this is magic. This happened, but it's not happening now, but I have this representation of it, and how I want to make someone feel while watching this, I think, is the most important thing to me, and for myself. Like, how do I want to feel when I watch this? And I kind of got to the point where I was falling in love with, again, the anamorphic look, and it was something that I didn't have a lens to shoot that. So my passion, my goal there was kind of more, let me figure out a way for myself to get this look. And, you know, of course I came across all the DIY community and the anamorphic shooters and the group, and it was a community. And I know that even at that time, it was just I felt like that's where that love comes from. There's some love here. Everyone's got this feeling, and I feel like, you know, of course I'm projecting my thoughts into it, but it's like, they must feel the same way I do. You know, that's why they're doing this. So I would look at things and get inspired, and I was that was kind of it for me. Like, from there, it was kind of no going back. I had to go forward with it until I could make something for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, my journey in cinematography started in the year 2000. So I was a production assistant. I had aspirations to one day become a cinematographer. And I just loved watching films and studying the way that cinematographers would apply their craft. And, you know, looking back to some of my favorite 80s films growing up, you know, not only the Star Wars trilogy, but things like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. All those films were shot with anamorphic lenses. Not all of them, but most of the films I like. And then, you know, as the 2000s came around and I started my career path towards becoming involved in cinematography, I was deeply inspired by Robert Elswit's work on Punch Drunk Love, which uses anamorphic flares to kind of tell a story about it's like kind of a psychological change for Adam Sandler's character in the film. And so every time the flare would appear, he's sort of experiencing a mental change. And I thought, wow, what are they doing? Like, how is Robert Elswit doing this? I don't know if you've seen that film, but it's a really cool film. And it's like, again, that magic realism feeling. So I started researching, like, what is it that makes these films look this way? And I discovered Panavision anamorphic cinematography. And I thought, wow, I don't have a movie camera. I don't have access to film. I don't even own a video camera, but I do practice photography. So, you know, I've been doing darkroom photography since junior high, and I love taking pictures and then trying to make my photos look cinematic. So I wanted to do portraits of all my friends in a cinematic style and kind of reference Ellsworth's work and some of the work of other great cinematographers and kind of make it my own. And I thought, well, maybe I can get an anamorphic lens somehow. So I started looking on eBay, and this is a time when, believe it or not, like Ekran and Lomo square front anamorphics were like sub $500. But for someone just at the beginning of their career, you go, oh man, I don't have $500. I don't know how I'm going to get $500. But you could find anamorphic projector lenses and even like ISCO Rama lenses on eBay. I had a ISCO MC 2000 that I got for like $25 on eBay back then.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but I had to sell it to pay rent. That's the sad part. But now,
oh my God.
if I'd kept some of those lenses from that time, I mean, I had some really cool projector lenses like Sancor 5Es. So I just started putting those in front of my stills camera and taking pictures and trying to figure out how to focus them. And then I'd scan the negatives because, you know, we didn't have digital photography then really.
Yeah.
Get negative scans done at Costco labs and then take those into Photoshop and do the D-squeeze. And it was really awesome just at the very beginning. But, you know, as you said, how do you take something that's a dream and turn it into reality? It's like, I would say it takes perseverance more than anything else. That's like 20 years ago now, but it feels like just yesterday. And so, you know, as time progressed, Forrest and I met online through the BMC user forums. I wasn't a Facebook user, not really a Facebook fan, but I do kind of lurk there now, funny enough. And I met Forrest through the forums and I saw what he was doing with kind of his own DIY approach. And I was like, this guy gets it. Like, this is what I was doing, you know, 12, 13, 14 years earlier. He gets it. He's taking it even further than I did, you know, crafting his own stuff even further than I did. And you know, I developed a manufacturing and business background, having established a wireless HD transmitter company. So yeah, Forrest and I started talking, you know, the perseverance and spirit of that innovation is what drew us together. And, you know, we started from the DIY place. And so we have so much love and respect for what all the DIY anamorphic cinematographers do. So it's a big part of our past and our present and culture. So we love it. We love what you do, Tito. We think it's really, you know, important to the community. And it's a celebration of the art and the technology. So that's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah. It's really, really awesome that you guys are putting back to the community that both of you came from. I find it amazing. I'm looking at the chat here and we have lots of people saying, yeah, I remember Forrest sanding glass on the porch. And yeah. I remember we Skyped and it was like, I think it was 2016. It was like solid almost 2 years between when we first talked to when you showed up at NAB with the first, like the prototypes for the 65 millimeters, I think was the first one, right? So that's a lot of perseverance, man. That's a lot. I've considered
thinking, strategy, planning, sleepless nights, money, long discussions.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. So how was it? I remember hearing some really cool stories about the beginning, like with the prototypes and getting it to NAB and getting into the anamorphic lens shootout from ShareGrid and who else is it? It's ShareGrid and Old Fast Glass, I think. Those guys.
Mark.
Like, how did you, I guess it's not that hard if you have a good anamorphic lens, just be like, hey guys, I have a brand new, never seen anamorphic lens. Do you guys want to check it out? I think that's like still today that would draw a crowd, but how was it? How did you guys approach that challenge of first getting to the market?
It's really relationship driven. So, you know, coming back to the human aspect of what we do, no one person can do this kind of thing on their own. So you need to not only have a great team of people and great collaboration skills, but you need to have good organization and good relationships. And, thankfully over the last 20 years, I've been fortunate enough to be going from being a PA to a set lighting technician to a union set lighting technician to then becoming a digital imaging technician, and then eventually getting to be a cinematographer. So across that spectrum of transitions, you meet an incredibly wide variety of people. And the way I look at it is, I'm not better or worse than anyone else, but I am perseverant and I will try to make good for my other colleagues. So, starting out as an electrician, we would pass jobs to each other. So if I have a job and my other friend doesn't, and I hear of a job, I'm going to refer my friend so that they're going to get hired and make some money to pay their rent and put food on the table. And I just consider that a way to pave a golden path. So if you do right by your other fellow humans, hopefully they'll do right by you, and then things grow and get better from there. And built so many relationships with really great people, and sometimes those people are curmudgeonly, and that's part of their spirit too. Like, people like Danny Toback, who owns a small rental house up here called Digital Film Studios. People like Christopher Probst, people like Jay Holben, all of the people at the ASC, especially the people that put on the master class. My mentor, Francis Kenny, ASC, Patty at the ASC, Alex at the ASC. These people put their heart and soul into cinematography. And so if you also care about cinematography and you care about people, you'll make friends with these people. And, the people at Tiffin, who were so fortunate enough to be hosted by at that first NAB, they are friends. They are, so kind-hearted, so warm-hearted, such good people. They make such great filters, and they opened their doors to us because we were just kind, and we said, hey, we'll help you show your filters. You don't make lenses, we don't make filters, but what goes great together, lenses and filters. So just being plain about things, being transparent, and just being open and saying, like, I can help you. Hopefully you can help me. Let's make the world a great place together. And just sort of that mutual respect level. Don't trash a place that opens its doors to you, kind of respect the opportunity, respect the people, and the road will be golden for you. Kind of rambling a little bit, but
yeah, I mean, Dan has made great relationships and in the past, and the ability to sort of call on that and say, hey, we want to show you something new. And, it's about knowing maybe who to talk to and at what time. Timing is very important. And like Dan said, it's not just a benefit for one person. There's a lot of ways to help each other out and to help the community, to help everybody. And so there's something I think that came about with resonating with this type of anamorphic lens that we were trying to bring about, something that would be more affordable than at the current time, I would say, to own a full prime, working lens. So,
and just a positive change in the industry, not only the price, but just a way to broaden access to tools that are needed and expressive. I don't know how many other people on here are music nerds, but it's really the guitar player, not the guitar, but we still love the guitars, right? So that's how I see lenses. It's like, you can make a great image with almost any lens, but if you know what you're doing, you have the right lighting and the right things in front of the camera. But at the end of the day, the tools are still neat. So we like to make tools for people.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's I like how this story went. We got Sharon Kanes here on the chat saying, I can personally attest to late nights and perseverance of Dan, and she's very proud of you.
Shout out my wife Sharon and my two children, Max and Zoe.
That's super sweet. I'm always like impressed by people joining live streams. I always think it's like, oh, it's going to be everybody who's really like nerdy into this. And it's all about the people. It's really about the relationships. And this last year, developing the channel and like reaching out to what I thought were like, oh, bigger people. These people will never answer me. They won't be interested in what I'm doing. And I realized that like the reach of this kind of content is much larger than I expected. I go to places, like I go on set or I go on rental houses, and people are like, hey, I know you. I've seen your videos. I'm like, damn. And your name is? So it's always like, usually people know me before I know them. And it's weird because I never thought about it that way. So I get that the industry is very, very relationship driven, and creating these connections, it's a very, very important thing to do. Very, very important.
And they know you for the good things that you do, not for being a jerk.
Yeah,
right?
hopefully.
I've never
I don't
heard
think
of,
I have a record of being a jerk, but
I've never
I
heard
don't
of
know.
Cheeto Parents doing anything untoward. So yeah, you got a great reputation out there. And shout out, not just humans, but shout out to my dog, Eddie. He's a Boston Terrier, and he helped star in our first sort of early test clips with the prototypes.
Like, pets don't get tired. Like, Finnegan here doesn't get tired. I can point cameras and lenses to him all day, and he'll be like, that's fine. I love it still. We got Steve Holt on the chat saying music nerd here, 13 plus guitars in the room he's at. So, and also the whole, like, any camera, any lens can make a great image. And we're always so focused. This is a Blake pet peeves. He's like, we're always talking that gear doesn't matter. And it does matter. Like, it does matter. If you want something to look that way, you need this piece of gear. If you want it to look at a different way, you need another piece of gear. So you kind of need different tools for different visuals or different stories, I guess, not just on the visuals.
It just clears the road to make your work easier. It's less struggle if you have good tools.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was the greatest revelation while shooting the cookbook stuff for module 1. It's like how easy it was to work with the Orions. I was used to working with DIY setups, and I was just like, oh, I can plug into the camera and I don't even have to do anything. This is it. This is all there is. Okay, I can enjoy this. It's going to be so easy. So we ended up shooting way more than we needed just because it was easy. No regrets. What else do I have? So as we're going towards like creating stories and telling stories, what are some of the things from the history of anamorphics and cinematography that we can take to today's standards, like things that we kept on and that we can still remember and grow from? What are some of your favorite picks from history?
What do you think, Forrest?
I'm bad when being put on the spot. I'm not.
I'll go.
I'll speak to. I think of the properties of anamorphic, the widescreen aspect is, I think, what sticks the most. And I'm prone to name films that are various squeeze ratios and all this, and sometimes I think they were anamorphic just because of memory. The bias of like, I saw that film 15 years ago, I don't remember, but it was widescreen, right? So it must have been anamorphic. It was just good. I think it's the framing, the composition that I feel maintains. There's almost like you slow things down to, in a way, like I find that I'm drawn to classic films more than I am to some of the modern stuff that I find, and I'm not trying to make this into any sort of diss, but I sometimes can't get into new material because it just doesn't feel, it just doesn't sit right with me. Yeah, the aesthetic or something's too flashy, it moves too much, and I kind of have to turn away and be like, yeah, I want something that has like purpose to the camera movement. And I'm just gonna say like something like Ben-Hur, some sort of epic film, right? And those stick visually with me to where I think about, why can't things look like that still? And what is it that's different? Of course, period films clothing and those type of things. But even up till, you know, sometimes I've referenced the Batman Begins, you know, the whole trilogy with the Nolan. That was probably at an age where I was definitely like, there's something different about these lenses. And there's properties here, and I understood better at that time. And again, it has that same, you're establishing shot, you get this sort of epicness inside the frame. I think that's what stuck with me.
And, you know, Tito, I hope this answer is not too philosophical for you, but
Nothing's
me,
too philosophical.
I always try to look at the reason why things are the way they are, right? And so if we look at why anamorphic cinematography exists, there's sort of three distinct pillars that make up the why. There's reasons that it exists for business, you know, primarily it's a commercial choice. So people stopped going to movies and started watching TV at home. So studios and theaters said, we need a way to get people back into the movies. And that affected another pillar, which is technology. So they looked for a technical solution to a financial problem. And then they looked at how does that affect the artistry? So once they built those first Bosch and Lone Baltar CinemaScope lenses, they realized, okay, there's a few things about these that are not exactly optimal from an artistic standpoint. Like, you know, people talk about mumps, which is when, as you focus closer with some of the anamorphic lenses, people's heads get a little more squished and they look weird and distorted. And so these three categories, you know, business, technology, and artistry are all interconnected and intertwined by invisible strings. And then you often get unintended second and third order consequences in the relationship of those things. And that often delivers unexpected and sometimes beautiful results. And that's why anamorphic cinematography is as important today as it was 50, 60 years ago. So, you know, effectively, it's like, it's the language of cinema now, right? So we automatically get into a cinematic mood when we see an anamorphic image, whether it's in widescreen delivery or whether it's in vertical 9:16 delivery. You can still tell it's anamorphic from the tool marks that are sort of unintended consequences of the design. So there's sort of these unintended technical things that happen that then affected the artistic choices, and that had a ripple effect back up. So it started as a business choice, it became a technological choice that affected our artistry, and then our artistry affected technology and then business again. And that's essentially why Atlas Lens Co. exists today, because we recognize not only a artistic need, but also a business need that we can help satiate and, you know, improve the technology and improve the artistry and just uplift humanity. And that's sort of.
I wanted. Yeah. I remembered something. I wanted to sneak back in. If I, you know, rephrasing your question, it was something about what is it about the maybe anamorphic that stuck with us from history. I was just going to say, when I see a film that's on a true anamorphic lens, like front anamorphic, I feel like I can see through the layers of those extra, you know, windows, the glass, right? And it's this interesting separation where I feel like that looking through that many layers, this elements technically, right? It sort of gives a, like, I'm looking in a picture inside of a box kind of thing. Like, if you ever seen, I'm gonna miss the term here, but when you put the photo up, it's back illuminated and you get your lenses on it. There's just something immediately drawn in, like, wow, this is cool, right? And my grandmother had one of these. I don't know.
Yeah, like a Viewmaster. It's the layers. It's the layers of a diorama, right? We love. I mean, I love simulacra. Like, you go to Disneyland and you get on the Disneyland train, and it goes around and you go through past the dinosaurs, and it's a three-dimensional. You know, that's kind of the purpose of anamorphic. Is it's a precursor to virtual reality.
It gives you the depth, is what I want to say. Something about it. And it's something I noticed in my early tests too, that the ones that were more convoluted, that had a lot of, and what I mean is the elements, I was stacking elements, checking different things and focus types out and playing around. And I remember some of them that had just so much glass in it felt very cool at the end, because as I moved around the room, I could feel It was like I could feel the lens in the shot
Mhm.
versus a lot of other lenses are very transparent. And that's another thing that and when I mentioned modern, some of these modern shows or movies, I don't see any of that. It's like missing. It's like I'm just kind of watching a representation of it that's very apparently similar to what it would have looked like being on set, maybe. And I think that that kind of just pulls me to like, oh, that's not as magical. I don't know.
I see. I see.
I think what you're talking about too is reflected in Ellsworth's work in Punch Drunk Love, because the choice of using the anamorphic characteristics in that film are very self-aware. So it's an awareness of the optical characteristics to tell a story about characters in the film.
Right.
So it's awareness of the camera and awareness of the optics that kind of indicates like thought. So it's kind of a way of displaying thinking in a visual medium, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's like a reminder, like you're able to view this because of this conduit, and it lets you, it reminds you very frequently of that's the reason you see this. And I think there's something, you know, interesting about that. It gives another layer of depth, I guess.
Yeah, we have Filmic here in the chat saying something that actually makes a lot of sense, that you are seeing when you're looking through a lens, like a well-tailored lens, you're seeing the film world, but not the film set. So you're looking through a portal. That's exactly the whole thing that we've been talking about. Oh man, I had a like a tailspin question to go from there. Yeah, I think like these days with the resolution, the sensors that we have, and like the technical part of the cameras, anamorphic shooting is not a requirement like it was back in like the 60s. Oh yeah, we need a bigger screen, so we need to squeeze the picture onto the film. Like we have enough resolution, so if we wanted to just shoot widescreen and crop the top and bottom, we would be fine. So shooting anamorphic boils down to an artistic choice. It's a storytelling choice. This will serve the narrative that I want to get across more than I need to see more on the sides. I think that's the direction.
And oh yeah, it's not a format choice anymore like it was then. You know, they were constrained. They didn't want to replace the projectors and the film stock in the theaters in the 50s. And now that's, you know, there's no restriction on a delivery format in that same way, except if you're looking at it this way or if you're looking at it this way, right?
Yeah. So then we were talking a little bit before, you have a museum collection kind of thing, like tons of lenses. I've heard from different people that you have several anamorphics throughout history, and I saw you like posting that you're selling some post Lomo or post Soviet Lomos, and I was like, okay, let's hear more about this. It's not that often that I hear about like history of lenses. Hit me.
Even before starting Atlas with Forrest, as I mentioned, I was a lens collector even at a fairly early age. And I grew up shooting stills on a Minolta camera with a 45 millimeter f2 lens, which is just an incredible lens. But I'm glad you asked about the Atlas Anamorphic Museum. So, you know, I have a pretty good sized collection of, you know, some of the special relics of the past. For instance,
just pulls one out.
Yeah, for instance, I've got this is a Bosch and Lohm Baltar attachment. So this is previously property of Disney Films. I can tell because it has a DF engraving. And so the DF engraving tells you that it belonged to Disney Films. And this might have been used on one of my favorite CinemaScope films, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's, you know, mid-50s sci-fi with kind of a, you know, what we'd call like a steampunk aesthetic now. You know, steampunk didn't exist then, but it's sort of that vintage concept of early science fiction, you know, and this is an attachment that was installed in the front of a variety of taking lenses. And this is, sort of the first effort between 20th Century Fox and Bosch and Lomb after they licensed Chrétien's patent when it was about to expire. So this is one really special piece of historical collection. And then, yeah, I've made it a serious point and serious effort to try to collect as many of those early Bosch and Lomb CinemaScope lenses. So I also have here today.
Oh my God.
This is a CinemaScope Baltar. And so this weighs about 30 pounds.
I was about to ask.
Maybe 20 pounds. And it has an integrated anamorphic system and a Baltar lens in the back. And then it has an integrated follow focus on both sides with a huge integrated marking chart for the camera assistants to check the focus marks as they're rolling. So, with that CinemaScope attachment, you'd have to pull focus on two lenses since it's not synchronized focus. Mm-hmm. And with this, you have an integrated follow focus, which moves the anamorphic system and the prime group together. And so they would use that on, some of the early Mitchell cameras at Fox. And then, they licensed it to other studios like Disney when they would want to do CinemaScope films. And yeah, I've got some of the really, really obscure ones. So I've got like Series E Baltars, which are meant to compete with Panavision. And so after Panavision came and helped with the mumps problem, Bosch and Lomb and Fox said, well, we got to do something about this because we don't want to pay these rentals to Panavision all the time. So then they came up with some, modified versions of these Baltars. And so I've got 2 or 3 of those. And then I have some of the CinemaScope 55 lenses, which are medium format, sort of 55 millimeter format anamorphic lenses. And they have a wet gate attachment. So they'd actually have to use water to keep the film flat as it moved through the system.
Okay.
So you can see where the plate rusted because they'd have to shoot a water jet over the film strip. And they only used that on 2 films, Carousel in 1955 and The King and I. So I am somewhat, I don't have any great verification of this, but I'm somewhat certain these lenses were used on both of those films with some of the early Fox, mid-century Fox people.
That's
so yeah,
super
and, I've got, like you said, I've got some Lomos, I've got some other really obscure lenses, and hopefully as the pandemic starts to wind down, we'll be able to install sort of a small museum in the Atlas building here in Burbank, Glendale area, and invite people to come see part of history and talk about it.
Yeah, I definitely have to come for a visit. Would you say that you had influence from these lenses that you had? Did you start this collection before or after you started making the Atlas lenses? And did you have an influence from what you could see through these lenses and in terms of like design ideas and the approach to making the Atlas, the Orions, or is this like completely separate things? How would you?
Go ahead, you can go first.
Well, they're yours. I want you to. Yeah, you can tell.
Yeah. So I did own these before we started working on the Orion series lenses together, and I would say that these are not necessarily a direct influence on the optical design, but I'd say they're sort of a spiritual grandfather to what we're doing. First of all, because Bosch and Lomb is one of the only American cinema lens manufacturers, right? So there's not really a lot of other cinema lens manufacturers that made lenses for sale, barring Panavision, and they don't sell the lenses. But of course, those are also here. The Panavision people are heroes to me as well. But if we look at sort of the pioneering spirit of the team at Fox and Bosch and Lomb in the mid-50s, that pioneering ideology is something that inspires both Forrest and I deeply. Bosch and Lomb were also the first to use computer-aided design for lens manufacturing. So they worked with IBM to do some of the ray tracing programs that helped them develop those early CinemaScope Baltars. So that's some really interesting lens manufacturing and design history that is somewhat forgotten, but that, we hope to revive and present as part of the preservation of this history.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, speaking to that, that's something that Dan and I looked at immediately. Was we were drawn to these lenses that, by scientific standards, you can measure and say that there's aberrations, right? There's imperfections there that we call character, these attributes. So sometimes I mix up, I don't say aberration too much because that's sort of a negative connotation, but attribute might be something more appropriate. So I'd look at these, what do the lenses from this era have that we like? What is it that we want to keep, and that did inform us in order to create really unique and proprietary methods and design through using the computer ZMAX in this case. We just have been able to find a way to try to carry that through. I think that was a unique journey as far as understanding, because a computer kind of wants to give you the best answer it can. So if you even try to correct something, you have to figure out ways to maintain it. And so part of our design nature was looking at what were the methods available to those of that time, what would be the things that they might focus on. And it helped us stay true to something of a classic look, I would call it, right? That holds on to some of those attributes that are that make it imperfect, but give you that character, that we're so familiar with, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and going back to what we were talking about earlier, about sort of unintended second and third order consequences, that's definitely how I would describe the aspects that most of us are attracted to in cinematic language in modern times. So, we don't need anamorphic lenses to make a widescreen movie, but if we want, certain levels of astigmatism, that beautiful out of focus bokeh that we all know and love, and, sometimes streak flares and other flare-like aberrations, that's something that, we love. And that was definitely something that the engineers at Bosch and Lohm, or Ekran and Lomo or Koa, none of them were thinking we got to make these have more flare or the bokeh doesn't look right on these. So some of those unintended second or third order consequences that make tool marks that we know and love and that we hope to carry forward. And so take all the best of the past and then take modern techniques and modern thinking and apply best practices to get, that kind of optical characteristic to other cinematographers.
Nice. On that note, for the people who didn't know, we had to push this conversation a bunch of times because Dan and Forrest were working on a secret project. And did you conclude your secret project? Is that something that you could discuss here, or is it still a secret? What's going on?
Well, Tito, what would you say if I told you that you're looking at us through the secret project right now?
All right. How can I tell?
I'll try to help you out here a little bit.
Oh, okay.
We got a little bit, a little taste.
Those are different than the ones that I get.
Yeah, pass me one too. I want the scorpion.
This one?
Yeah. Yeah, check out this bad boy.
There you go.
Oh yeah, that's even stronger.
Yeah, that's a strong one.
This is my favorite flashlight that we use for flare checking. Look at these off-axis guys too. I love these.
Wow. Okay. So are this implies different coatings at minimum. I got the chat's just going crazy. People are like, amber coatings, amber coatings, amber coatings.
Nope. Yeah, film that one. Yeah, they're not amber coatings. So what you're looking at right now is Forrest and I through an Atlas Orion Silver Edition lens. And so this is a limited edition run of 106 lens sets that have not only specially designed optical coatings, but also optimized air spacings and precision tolerances adjustments that allow us to create a new, expressive, and unique version of the Orion series lenses.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. Because I remember from previous live streams and presentations from you guys, the audience was always like, can you tune my lenses, detune my lenses, get different coatings? Is that something that Atlas will do? And I guess that's answered now. You were looking into it and developing it. How long was that project? Like, how long did it take from the idea to getting to the lenses that we're using right now, I guess?
Yeah, you could say that this was a 5-year journey. I mean, effectively, we're in the 5th year of Forrest and I's collaboration right now. And, at the beginning of developing the Orion series together, we looked at like, how is it that we're going to do what we want to do and change cinematography for the better and for the people. And our goal was start with a minimum viable plan to make really great sets of lenses, starting with a 3-lens set, because as a startup, that's attainable relatively if you're focused and you have the right track. And, the silver edition represents sort of our spiritual collaboration towards making something that pays homage to the history of cinema, and elevates the level of what we do with the Orion series to a new paradigm.
Yeah.
Really good looking.
It's essentially a 5-year journey, but we've been working on this for a little over a year in terms of directly. Actually, it's been probably like 18 months at least that we've been focused on this particular effort.
Sweet. Yeah. Earlier, I was trying to guess which lens you were on, and I was like, that looks like a 32 or a 40. And you said yes and no. So now I'm curious. What are we looking at? Because I'm on a 40.
We're on a 50 mil. So it's a 50 mil on a Alexa Mini LF.
Okay.
So it's not using the full LF sensor, but this is sort of like the 3.4K extraction of the Mini LF sensor.
Nice. Yeah, I could have guessed it. I was looking at the door and the corners. I'm like, it's not too warpy like it would be on the 32 for sure. So anyway, that was a parenthesis. We had someone, let me figure out who that was in the chat here. Ellis Lindfors, curious about lens coatings. Is that something that you create yourself, or is it created by a third party? And they say that the Orions produce a lovely look, which I agree. But also now we have different coatings. So how's that? How do you design coatings? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a science to knowing what colors you're going to get through your reflections of the coating type. And you do have to engineer and specify the metals used, the material basis of what the coating's made of, the composition and thickness to that composition of each one of those metals or materials. So we had to do some studies, and then we do some tests. We don't have the coating machine or anything like that. So it's
not here in Burbank.
Yeah, not done here in Burbank at that level.
We specifically designed these coatings to deliver the outcome that we're looking at here. So we call them the silver edition because they have not only sort of a neutralish silvery flare characteristic on their own, depending on the light source, but because there's also sort of a silver halide aspect to the way that the coatings take on reflectance and refractance in the spectrum.
Nice. Okay, that tackles my coatings question.
Every aspect of the Orion series and all Atlas lenses is designed by Atlas.
Nice. Yeah, I've always wondered about coatings. I've had like an Iskorama recoated once, and the note that I got before that from the company that was doing it is like, this is a very dangerous procedure and your lens might break. You got to sign this waiver before we do it. I'm like, okay. And this also talks back to some stuff we discussed at NAB about like how much of the original glass gets to the end of the journey inside of a lens, and how much is lost due to uh, quality control and tolerances. Like, we had a question earlier here about building prototypes, and if you're planning on making a cheaper lens. So I think you guys are great to explain why anamorphic lenses tend to be so expensive. And even like we have $30,000 expensive, we have more than that, and then we have Atlas at $10,000. And for that, for like an individual, that can still be a lot of money, although it's affordable in comparison to a lot of stuff. So what are some of the things, the costly things that go into making an anamorphic lens?
Everything. Yeah, just kidding. I mean, just kidding, but not kidding. So like the reality of manufacturing any kind of lens is that it's a very complex process, not only from the design standpoint, but getting into engineering and manufacturing and production, it's massively expensive. So it's not for the faint of heart, because not only can you go all the way through the process of designing, getting to prototypes, and then find out something isn't quite what you expected it would be, and then you have to scrap something. But there's also a lot of fallout in terms of when you're polishing and grinding cylindrical lenses. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. So, you know, most lenses are spherical lenses, and they're radially symmetrical. So the process of polishing and grinding those is relatively simple and figured out by this point. But you would think that something like making a cylinder shaped piece of optics shouldn't be that hard. But the reality is, when you get right down to it, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, not only from the grinding and polishing standpoint, but from things like purity of the glass, refractive index, tolerances of the glass, from the melt, all different kinds of precision things that can go wrong that you know we take for granted, because we live in a world populated by very high precision objects. So, you know, we look at things like our phones and we say, well, that's a flat piece of glass on the front, right? And it's flat to human perception. But if you use metrology equipment to inspect this flat surface, it's far from flat. So there's a lot of peak and valley deviation. There's a lot of irregularity to that surface. So it looks perfectly clear and flat to us, but the realistic, you know, imperceptible to human nature of it is that it's actually incredibly wavy and irregular and wouldn't meet the standards of an optical lens.
Yeah. And then, you know, when you then make it past that, you know, with other types of, and maybe even simpler lenses, let's say, there's not maybe so much hold on. You just kind of put it together, you bolt it down, and everything's kind of falling in within a range. And it might be harder to identify if that lens is underperforming, overperforming, or just right in the middle. Usually it's never going to, I guess, saying overperform over the line on this side, or this much too far, too close. There are a lot of considerations, especially when you start to mix cylinders into the lens design, that if things are not put in the right spot, and if things are not calibrated to a certain degree every time the right way, you're going to get worse results than you should. And we have to make sure that the design is respected and carried through. So after all of those challenges are met of just producing on the component level everything, and the metal work is just as important in holding those figures and holding that, you know, tilt references, parallelism, everything has to be there, concentricity. At that point, you then have to calibrate everything to make sure that it's actually meeting and, you know, it's designed positions. That includes, you know, then for the cinema's sake, you want to make sure your focus is actually landing on the marks too. So that's a balancing act. You got to make sure that also worked. So it kind of continues. It doesn't just stop at like, it's the pieces are made and the pieces are bolted together. Whereas in other designs, that might be an easier way to look at how you might process that lens, because the chances of you needing to adjust, it's like, well, you know, you just put a shim there and you don't have to consider anything else. But in this case with anamorphics, Even our lenses, it's not like that. So the price generally is going to be higher than spherical lenses.
And, you mentioned more expensive lenses. And so, I have to give a big shout out to our chief optical engineer, Scott DeWald. He's a veteran of the optical engineering industry. So he's one of the first 50 people to use the ZMAX software in the world starting in 1993. And one of the key things that he taught us here is about tolerancing your designs so that they're relatively fault tolerant. And so that's part of the design parameter package when you're first setting up your systems. And the goal with these lenses is, for some of those lenses, it might be $30,000 or $50,000 per lens. They might only be expecting to sell 10 to 25 to 50 of each of those focal lengths a year. But our goal is to serve a broader group of people, any cinematographer who wants to use them. It's not an exclusive club. These are the people's lens. These are the cinematographer's lens. That's the real goal of Atlas, is to be the cinematographer's lens company. And so we knew we had to set our targets to be at a bar where people could actually access them one way or another. And that's part of the design parameters to make them relatively affordable. So it's a balancing act. All lens design is compromise, whether it's an anamorphic lens or not. And so it's about picking and choosing the areas that you want to compromise so that you don't sacrifice the attributes that you want to stay true to and maintain throughout the lens.
Cool. That answers it. That clarifies a lot of things. I don't know. From DIY experience, there's a lot of just like hacking and mixing things and combining parts and being like, oh yeah, this works great. But I guess if you put in all the tolerances and all the mechanics, all of those parts take a ridiculous amount of time. Like on set with the DIY rig, I'm slow, and that might not be costing me on the rig, but it's definitely costing me in time that I am paying the whole crew. So that's a money saving thing that a lot of people don't realize or appreciate. Tying back to what you said of reaching a broader audience, Atlas mission is anamorphic for all. And that was actually what encouraged me to reach out to you guys for the cookbook. Like we had talked before, and I was like low key, hey, maybe I can work with you. And you were always like encouraging of that. And when I was getting started into this and like trying to push the cookbook forward, I was like, if anyone's going to be really into this, it's going to be Dan and Forrest. So those are the first people that I'm going to talk with. And I'm so glad it worked out. Would you say you're closer to achieving your mission of anamorphic for all? Everybody's asking, where's the Atlas $5,000 lens? Is that ever going to be a possibility?
Who knows, right? I mean, the future is wide open for those who are willing to write the future and make the future. So I'd say keep your eyes on this space. There's a lot of really cool things we're working on. And I think, for me personally, I just have so much gratitude for what we've built as a team here in terms of the people we work with, the kind of workplace that we've built, and the kind of product that we make. It's nothing short of exceptional. And that's really the kind of experience we're looking to deliver to people, is an experience of delight, like heartfelt delight. So if you interact with our lenses, whether you're renting them or buying them, we want you to have sort of a palpable sense of the spirit and care that went into making it and providing it. So that's, we're on a really kick-ass path here, is what I'd say. And we're so proud of our team and what we've accomplished. It's again, beyond exceptional.
Yeah, your team is really, really amazing. Everybody that I've interacted with has been really good to talk to and clear on what they're doing and what they're expecting from me. So it doesn't happen all the time.
Shout out to Kathy and our marketing team, and shout out to production here, and shout out to engineering, and shout out to sales. Everyone, I mean, shout out to the whole company here. You guys just make me proud every day. Thank you.
We're going a little over. It's 12 now, so we should be wrapping up. I have two questions that I actually want to ask. So if you're okay with going a little bit over, we can do that. Otherwise, we'll save them for the next one.
To paraphrase the internet, I got time today.
All right. We got a question from the chat from Jeffrey Bassett saying, first of all, he's thanking you for the cost-effective solution with the anamorphics and wondering if you ever consider different stretch factors to increase coverage. And I'm going to hop onto that question with what I originally had in mind, which is it's very uncommon to make a movie with a 2.66 aspect ratio, which is what we get from a 4:3 sensor and a 2x squeeze. So what pushed you to make a 2x lens and not 1.8, for example? And to make this a more complicated question, no, let's go for this and then I'll complicate after you answer.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a fantastic question. The reason we chose 2x is that that's a traditional element we wanted to maintain from classic CinemaScope imaging. So, we look at some of our favorite lenses, whether they're Panavision C series, Panavision E series, Panavision G series, Lomo square fronts, Ekran Elite round fronts, Koas, they're all 2x lenses. So why break what's not broken? Stick with the classic for the first offering.
Yeah, well, it was important to us to think about what if you have the opportunity to shoot with both the same project. You don't want to convolute it by saying, well, now we got to switch things in the camera because of these. At the time, it wasn't so common to think about 1.8. But we all understand the logic of it, right? It's a matter of fact that there were more 2x lenses and still probably more 2x lenses now.
Oh, yeah.
And if anyone is going to mix them, which has been done, and then it kind of made sense to serve that purpose of letting them just swap it on the camera, and you don't have to worry about any other sort of consideration at that time.
And you mentioned like 2.66 delivery from a 4:3 sensor, and it's sort of like the ontology of the delivery formats was something that was originally done out of necessity. So they made film 4:3 because that was what they had. Starting back as early as like pre-1910, it was the Fox and Kodak film format that they would use, and that actually influenced still photography, believe it or not. So the motion picture format of film was adopted by Oscar Barnack into what became the Leica camera, with the 135 format, which took movie film from that time and then turned it on its side. So you get a slightly bigger frame out of that same strip of film, and use that same stock. So it's kind of hard to reinvent the wheel if things are already in motion. But because of the world that we live in now with multi-aspect sensors and deliveries, there's actually an incredible opportunity to do things completely differently. And believe it or not, there's sort of a new burgeoning format that uses our 2x lenses in a completely unintended and unexpected way, that at this time we're calling Atlas scope. And there's actually a feature film that was done with it that will hopefully be coming out later this year.
Okay, I'm curious.
Talk more about this Atlas scope concept, and it doesn't require reinvention of the lens. It's just a different application of the 2x squeeze. So it's a really interesting new format that is sort of an unintended consequence that resulted in something really beautiful, and we think will be useful to a lot of cinematographers and directors.
That's cool. I'm interested. I'm curious about the film. I'm going to complicate the question now because 1.8 it's becoming more popular, and we have the Vasons, we have Chameleons, we have, I think Cook has the 1.8 series now, and like one of the main things that I see users talking about is you reduce the squeeze factor, you reduce the oval shape. So it becomes less stretchy. And I was experimenting with a rear anamorphic adapter the other day and was able to get a different like overall squeeze factor with a 2 times front, a 1.33 back, rotated on its side. So I had overall a 1.5 times squeeze, but I still had the full 2 times bokeh. And so if you were to consider this path, do you think it's a possibility to have like a lens with the 2 times front anamorphic for flares, for bokeh, for all the classic look, and then an element in there that changes the squeeze secretly to 1.8 or something like that, something different just overall? Am I spoiling the future?
That's not our future necessarily, but I mean, I have to give my hats off to you to trying something that's not conventional. So like, props to you to doing something different. That's what DIY is all about. And I mean,
yes.
What I like to say is that filmmaking is prototyping. So there's sort of a direct correlation between the way we approach making movies. You know, takes or prototypes to the perfect take, and building prototypes, whether it's something DIY or otherwise, can be considered a prototype to achieving, you know, your Mount Olympus dream vision. So every step you take on the road, as long as you stay on that road, is a good step, as long as you're learning. But yeah, I mean, that's a neat and different approach.
Well, that's a cool application. I mean, I honestly could say I haven't thought of that, you know, so that's kind of.
Well, there you go.
you had the reverse squeeze at sort of the outside of the exit pupil. So, you know, like for those who don't know, the reason the bokeh looks the way it does with anamorphic lenses is that you have a different coefficient to your entrance and exit pupil. So it's like a pupil aberration, essentially. And there are some anamorphic lenses that use both horizontal axis and vertical axis anamorphic elements that are already out in the market. Even as far back as the Series E Baltars I was talking about, they actually did this. So their sort of squeeze compensator elements are, 90-degree rotated cylinder compensators. Yeah. So there's a wide variety of ways to approach sort of the technical problems and deliver different aesthetic results.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times you think about, I'm going to send you all on an Easter egg hunt now to go look at how even similar focal length anamorphics, let's say a 32 or a 40 or a 50, something in there. There might be 2 times squeeze, but their field of view won't be the same. And some of those properties that Dan was speaking to, there's lenses out there right now that exist. And if you check them out, I mean, it'd be fun. People can kind of calculate, like, they think the math might be the same, and it should be if you're talking about just a theoretical lens. But when you're talking about real rays and going to the optical system, adding in sideways cylinders, doing all that stuff, it does give you interesting results as far as your resulting field of view. So you might think it's always going to be this wide if I say it's a 32 or a 50, but go check out some like tests and footage. I mean, I found some interesting things where they're done side by side. Like they look like a big difference and they're staying at the same focal length, but it's just the attributes of how that comes out of to the pupil. Yeah. And
especially the way the coefficient of squeeze changes across your field points. That's
this distortion. Yeah. Big deal.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. How the bokeh changes like basically across the frame, right? So how distorted it gets from the center where it's perfect to the edges.
And not only the bokeh, but the image plane as well.
Yes. Yes. This is a good transition into the next thing, which is like to make an analogy in high-end cars. Some companies sacrifice horsepower to change the engine note to just make it sound better. Was there anything that you had to compromise in the process of designing and making the lenses to make them feel and look as nice as they do? Like any optical compromises that you had to give into to like keep the set size consistent, keep the price consistent? I guess price consistent is a big one. How did that work for you guys? Because the Atlas, I have the 40 and it's just so easy. It's just so easy to use. I keep saying that, and I don't think people believe me enough of how easy it is to use this lens. So there is some secret magic here, and I don't know what it is.
You want to take it first, or I mean, basically, we kind of answered it earlier, which is to say all lens design is compromise, and effectively, we wanted to provide a very balanced product that has concierge level experience. So when you get this, you're not fiddling around with it, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but just that, you know, we want to save you money, time, and give you the best experience. But I'd say like our biggest compromise, if there was one, was the amount of time that we were able to spend, and in terms of development. So we had a very tight development cycle on these lenses, and we're learning new things about optical design every week, which is part of the mission here. Learn every day. It's a learning culture. And so, you know, there's things that we learned by doing these products and offering them. And there were intentions that we put into it. So it really comes down to intention. And we were extremely intentional and made choices to provide a very balanced lens set. So I like to think of these as like the Volkswagen of lenses. Like, I love driving Volkswagen cars. They're beautiful. They're slightly quirky, but they definitely get you from point A to point B in a really fun way. And that's kind of the practical nature of Atlas lenses. Is these are meant to get the job done, but hopefully in a beautiful way that serves you as a person. Do you have any other, do you see it differently, or do you see any other kind of?
Oh, no, I just, kind of going to the ease of use. I think that was definitely a consideration. So that did, I would say, considerations such as size, right? The size of the front element. We understood that keeping the size consistent would be better than not keeping the size consistent, at least for the main range of lenses, all the ones that are released up to this point. So there was some innovation there to try and make sure that you can get a true field of view of 40 all the way through that, system, and not vignette, on the target sensor that we were targeting when doing the design optimization.
And the lenses don't barrel in and out, they're internal focus, which is.
So exactly. Another thing would be moving parts, debris, entering into the system, points that we'd want to make sure that it couldn't, and keep that consistent too. So a lot of that kind of did inform how we came up with a solution for it. It was more of a challenge, as Dan said, because there was time to that. You couldn't spend 2 years trying to figure it out. It was maybe more a matter of months into what do we do to make this operate the same and work the same. And a lot of I'd say the look that you get, especially at the 40 you're speaking about, is directly connected to that, for sure. I'd say it has a very cool and unique look that you can see immediately is a little bit different than perhaps a 50 or 65. You can see kind of that thing I was talking about, to the layers effect, right? When you're staring through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We have people on the chat asking, since Atlas creates its own glass, would you ever considering making a single focus solution for DIY users? No variable diopter manufacturing company has done this. Atlas could innovate a new market. So we got that question just now. A few people also echoed this. Do you have plans to dipping your toes into the DIY market, or are you just sticking to cinema and that's that?
So yeah, at the beginning, that's kind of what I was trying to make for myself, because that seemed like a viable way to shoot, which was take my base lens and add anamorphic properties to the front of it, and make it single focus. There are a lot more considerations to do that on a way that might satisfy everybody, because there are certain drawbacks to not knowing the optical system behind that solution, and it's not going to be super versatile if it's just one item for everything. There is a lot of there's a lot more things that could go wrong with that, but it's really a matter of, at this point, I'll let Dan speak to the idea that if we're going to do that, I could say that from what I see, most likely no, at least not in the near future, for those reasons of uncertainty that can ultimately come back to us and say, why is it made like this? Well, it's like, what is your taking lens? That's a very important factor. And as you guys, the DIY community knows best. There's certain like combinations that seem to work, and there's reasons why that happens. And there's unknown things that I see a lot of things happening that they're supposing the lens is maybe still keeping its F number. So there's times when it's not. That's a very important thing too.
Yeah. And I think from a product experience standpoint, first of all, we have so much love for the DIY community. As we said, that's where we came from. And we think that people are clever enough that if they want to go down that route, there's a multitude of options to figure out how to do it yourself in a way that will please you. But that if we somehow intervene in this space, it's not going to make your experience actually better. And its chances are going to make our experience worse. No offense to anyone, but we're very focused. Sometimes saying no to certain things is saying yes to best possible outcomes. So, in short, what we want to do is provide people with a experience that just delights them through and through, so that 25 or 50 years from now, if you own an Orion series lens, or if you own a future product that we make, you cherish that tool and you can reflect on how that improved your career path. It improved your artistry, and it improved your potential and possibility to make a living. And so, in that sense, we think that there are a lot of things that are on our roadmap currently that are going to make a big impact on the way cinematography is done and the delight and joy that you experience doing your art and craft and making money, hopefully. And so, as we said earlier, watch this space, because we're doing some things that we think will really warm your hearts and get you excited about cinematography and making your best work.
Nice. Yeah, I remember when we were talking about for the cookbook before we shot, and I was asking a bunch of questions about DIY, and both of you were like, yeah, but when you go from a DIY rig, you're starting from a place of compromise. You're putting together pieces that were not meant to be together, and you don't have the full control. So it boils down to the customer experience. Like, you want to ensure that if somebody's using an Atlas lens or glass, they will have a certain level of an experience that you definitely cannot control if you start offering things for the DIY market.
And it's not that we need to control that. I mean, we just believe that if you're on that path, you can definitely figure out cool things to do on your own. We just don't think us intervening in that part of the space would really improve cinematography as much as what we're on the road to doing now.
Yeah. I got some people asking where they can find more info about the Silver series and when that's going public. I got a very fancy email, but I don't know who else got it.
Well, have you guys heard of Star Wars Day?
Star Wars Day? May the 4th?
Might be something happening on that day that you might want to look out for.
Very nice. Okay. I see we referenced Star Wars at the beginning and at the end of this conversation. Very clever. Very cleverly played, Dan. We got a question here from one of the members of the channel. I know in the end, the most important thing is bringing your product to life, but you also have to pick a price. How and why did you get to the price point that you're at? Since there was nothing like you at that time, And how did that, like, I think that ties a lot into some of the previous questions about quality control, the cost of making things, the timeline that you were on. But is there any like small bit that you're like, oh, this really helped us figure out the price we should go for?
No, absolutely. So the big question, we are the customer in a sense. So at the time of starting the company with Forrest, I was in the market for anamorphic lenses. And I remembered back to those $500 Lomo square fronts that I used to see back in 2001 and 2002. And I was like, gosh, it'd be cool to I have a little money now. I could actually buy one of these. And then I look at what the price people were selling those things for, and they were like 12, 13, 14, $15,000 a square front lens. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I remember when these were $500 each, and people were using them for door stops, and that was too expensive for me. And so we sort of looked at the world of cinematography and what other lenses were available. And, you look at some good spherical lenses, and you could get really good spherical lenses for around anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000, $12,000, $13,000 a lens. And that's still a lot of money. But we thought, well, what we want to do is offer lenses that are in this category space, but anamorphic. So it's not a compromise of choice between, well, am I going to pick a spherical lens because that's what I can afford? And so we worked backwards a little bit from the price and said, okay, if we know this is the price, what are the design decisions we can make that help us optimize our optical and mechanical engineering to actually achieve a price point that lets us build a company that will sustain for the next 100 years or more, hopefully, and deliver on the promise of making the best cinematography lenses for cinematographers and directors.
Yeah.
And so it was, part of that experience of pricing came from a lot of market research and, from the previous business that I'd started, as well as being a cinematographer who's often buying and selling gear, right? So I would buy gear, use it, and then sell it. So I have a really close purview on the new and used equipment market and watching the way that people price things. And that helped us kind of determine a price point. And then we optimized our engineering choices around that target price point for the product. And it's interesting to look at the lens market now, especially with things like Canon FD lenses, where, people would be giving those away at a yard sale and not want them. But now you're hard pressed to find L series or pre-L series FD lenses for any kind of reasonable price. It's wild. It's really strange to see, but it's also kind of cool. And so we wanted to make something that's a valuable commodity for the camera person, and that hopefully becomes a part of their kit for life. But if they can't keep it for life, that it holds some level of market value so that they can sell it and, pay the rent and buy the food they need to live, if that's the condition, like it was for many this last year. But thankfully things are still going strong at Atlas, and, the world is hopefully recovering from this pandemic. We're all trying, hearts out to everyone out there who lost someone, or, just kind of the mental health crisis that many of us have experienced in the face of this pandemic. But I think it's going to make all of us stronger as people. Hopefully we all feel some relief from it soon. So hearts out to everyone.
Yeah. That was a really cool explanation. I don't think I ever asked that question. I just accepted it. And I love the logic of offering something completely different, like offering an anamorphic lens in a spherical price range, and then working out back from what's your target price to what you can do about it to maximize the budget that you have for each lens. I think that's really, really neat. And I also hope Atlas runs for 100+ years. Worst case.
we're both hackers in a sense. Like, you know, you're talking about the DIY community. We're hackers, we're makers. That's how we see the world. So the world is there for those who make the path. And we're analyzing and trying our best to approach things from a new and different pioneering direction all the time. So hats off to anyone out there doing DIY experimentation and prototyping your life, prototyping your art. Keep it going, you know?
Yeah. Worst case, you can you close the doors and you hide. And then in 5 years, you're like, oh, I found some Atlas lenses and sell them for like 5 times the price or something like that.
Or you could use them, you know, use them to burn a zombie in a zombie apocalypse. Just hold it up to the sun and, you know, the rays, and then, you know, start a zombie fire. Cool.
Yeah. Okay. I think this covers everything that I had. This was awesome. We have a few random leftover questions here on the chat. We're already at half an hour over. Before we part, I'm going to ask everybody who's out there watching to click that like button. After all, this is still YouTube. So the more likes, the more visible this video becomes. And
subscribe and ring that bell.
Smash that like button.
There you go. I should hire these guys.
That's right. Ring the bell.
I'm available on Cameo if you need me.
All right. That's great. It's good to know. So yeah, thank you, Dan and Forrest, for joining me on this. Thanks, Kathy, for hiding behind there. I know you're there somewhere and you can hear me.
She's masterminding this. She's not hiding.
Yeah,
you know,
she's a genius. Honestly, great hire. I heard that chuckle. So it was a great pleasure. It was awesome. Super great talking to you guys. And
thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Sheila.
We'll send you some flares on the way out if we're on the way out. I mean, I'm happy to answer more questions unless you're tired.
All right. No, I'm gonna see if I have one last question left. Here we go with blue flares on my side and other flares for silver edition on Dan and Forrest side. The only thing that I can see here is Ichidomo asking your opinion on current run by rehousing companies on vintage glass. That's just like an offshoot question. Any particular views?
It's astounding. I mean, I like it better than cryptocurrency because it's a real asset. So hearts out, and you know, I'm blown away by the engineering efforts of Zero Optic and TLS. Like the work that they do is stunning. And then, you know, I'm seeing more and more stuff from White Point Optics in Finland, also super impressive. And, you know, Ilya Volkov at Moscow Optical Workshop working on some things. So it's, you know, we have a really amazing small community, and it's a unique engineering and artist community. And we're just grateful to be a part of it. And we're grateful for the opportunity to talk with you today. And like, I'm bummed to see the price of FDs go up because I sold all my FDs too cheaply years ago to pay my rent. So I'm kind of crying inside, just like I sold that ISCO MC a lot of years back.
Well, it's okay.
Things that I used to have, but you know, I got some weird stuff like this now. So
yeah. Yeah.
You know, these things are just objects. Like I'd rather build relationships with people and make art that lives forever.
Yeah.
So
100%.
Thank you for having us here. I mean, we really appreciate it. It's been great.
Thank you, guys. And I guess that's it. That wraps our conversation for today. Only half an hour extra. And yeah, thank you for joining us, to whoever's watching, and stay tuned for more updates on everything anamorphic. See ya.
See ya.
Thanks again.